Well, shalom and a very warm welcome to each and every one of you who are watching today our program called People Making a Difference. And our guest today is a special man whose life has made an incredible difference here in Israel and around the world, in Australia, in Africa, in Indonesia, and in China, all over the world. You're going to be amazed when you hear the testimony of Gerald Rowlands, Dr. Gerald Rowlands, who is an amazing apostle. He is truly an apostle in this generation. He's from Australia, but he's a very dear personal friend of ours, and he with his wife Liz are just special servants, and you won't want to miss this interview. This is a special one you really want to stay tuned to see. So we'll be right back after these important messages. Warning, the images you're about to see are real. No effort has been made to soften the horrors that real people are forced to live through in today's often cruel world. In these troubled times, disaster can strike without warning, and whether a natural disaster or one planned by people bent on hurting others, someone has to answer the call to help the victims. In Israel, the first responders with the best help in the worst situations is Zaka, a unique group of volunteers who undergo grueling training and disciplined preparation to save lives, rescue the lost, and provide respectful recovery and identification of the dead. In Haiti, Zaka's search and rescue teams were first there, working tirelessly around the clock, finding the trapped, saving lives, and giving medical care to the crushed and infected. Zaka proved themselves as selfless, daring, and effective first responders at 9/11, at Katrina, and in the wake of the tsunami, where when identifying horribly disfigured victims, they were called the team that never sleeps. Sadly, due to the increase of anti-Semitic threats, once again the Jewish communities stand as a target for ongoing insults and attacks just because they are Jews. But beware, the terrorists have promised over and over again, first the Jews and next the Christians. Zaka now knows that Jews or anyone considered infidels or enemies of the jihadists cannot rely on governments or the UN to provide the immediate help needed in these perilous times. So Zaka has launched an unprecedented project to train Jewish communities in how to deal with disaster situations as a result of terror, anti-Semitic attack, or natural disaster. And with the spread of terrorism, Zaka is also looking for partners in the Christian world who want to join the effort of saving life in their own cities as well. Zaka's experience is vast, and they are willing to train anyone wishing to partner with them. This is called the Zaka family, joining together to save life. Now, in all the world, no non-Jewish entity has ever come close to giving the love and help that's been provided by the Christian community here in America and Canada to those in need around the world. And that's why we at Zaka are asking you to help us to find committed Christians to join the Zaka family. Together, we can help people in need around us, whom the Messiah calls the least of these my brethren. We need your help today, not only to continue the work Zaka is doing in Israel and around the world, but also to train Christian teams to deal with disaster when it comes to their communities. We need your help to tell Zaka's inspiring story on Christian television and in large churches and wherever godly people, Jew or Gentile, come together. Really, as they say, we're all in this together. Can we count on you? To join the Zaka family today, call 1-800-717-0785 or go online at www.zakafamily.org. Thanks, and God bless you from Jerusalem. Well, welcome back, and we're so glad to have you here today, Gerald, with us. What a blessing you are. And, you know, your life has been lived out in the Bible, because when the disciples came to Jesus, they said, what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? And he said a lot of things, but one of the things he said, this gospel will be preached in all the world as a sign among all the nations, and then shall the end come.
True.
And you have had an incredible part in this prophecy.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit, first of all, tell us about your family, and then tell us about your work.
Well, my family consists of a very wonderful wife,
Amen,
the very
I know
best
her.
available.
A great cook, too.
A great cook. You remember that? Yeah, you're a colonel. And we have 3 daughters. The eldest is Christine. The middle one is Kathy, who lives here in Jerusalem. And the youngest one is Jenny. She's married to a Baptist pastor. The 2 girls that are married to ministers.
Yes, we've met them both.
Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful man of God. And you've got grandchildren.
We have 6 grandchildren and 4 great-grandchildren.
Oh, my. Well, we always knew you were great, so this confirms it. Now, you've been married to Liz for how long?
52 years.
And in ministry, how long?
I've been in ministry about 54 years.
And Liz comes from a line of ministers.
Sure, she does, yes. Her dad was a very well-known pastor in Australia, Sydney, Australia. His name was Philip Duncan.
Okay.
And his father was also a minister, so there's a good righteous line.
Well, this is so precious to have you come to visit us here in Israel, and we're so grateful for your input. Now, tell us, you were telling us yesterday a little bit on the phone of some things that are happening in your ministry. Explain to the viewing audience a little bit of your history, how you went to Australia, then you started ministry there, and then you went to South Africa, if I'm getting this right,
Yeah,
and then you came
correct.
back to Australia and launched this church planting ministry.
I had been a pastor and an evangelist for almost 20 years. And while I was pastoring a large church in Brisbane, I felt God speak to me one day. And he said initially, I want you to have some African fruit. I prayed that through, and it gradually became clearer.
Wasn't just breadfruit and mangoes.
No, I wondered about that at first. But it resulted in Elizabeth and myself taking our 3 children and going off initially to South Africa.
By faith.
We went out by faith. We didn't have anyone supporting us. We had one church that promised to support us. But amazingly, the Lord raised a lady from the dead on the boat going over there, and she and her husband, who were quite wealthy retired people, they supported us very generously the whole time we were there. We had some big crusades initially. We saw several thousands of people make decisions for Christ. And then I realized that to get a big crowd, especially when a healing's taking place, and get people to raise their hands, that was the simple part of the equation. The more difficult part was retaining those people afterwards and building them into the body of Christ so that they could go on to spiritual maturity. So I realized from that perspective that teaching was ultra important, especially teaching pastors. They seem to have little idea about how to integrate people, new converts, into their churches. So I started a Bible college in what was Salisbury and became Harare.
Yes.
Independence came while we were there. And the first year we had 47 students, and a great time, a 1-year course in 3 semesters. And that was the beginning of something great, because one of the pastors that we had on staff with us, he took the material out of the college and offered it to 27 denominations in the country.
Wow.
They started training centers in each of their churches, and the graduates planted 10,000 churches in 10 years.
Wow. Now that's quite an accomplishment, to get training materials and into 27 different denominations, because how do you handle the doctrinal issues?
Well, it had a definite charismatic lean, but it was non-denominational. We tried to steer clear of any theology that would separate and divide people. So it was, as a matter of fact, even the Catholic Church took it on. The Anglican Church in Southern Africa took it on. They made me an honorary archdeacon, and so it was accepted in just about every denomination that we offered it to. And that was one of the results. And then when we felt that our time in Zimbabwe had finished, we went home to Australia for a little while, and then we were invited to go into Asia and to live in Singapore. The initial assignment was with an Asian ministry called International Christian Mission, who had planted 20 Bible colleges but didn't have curriculum. I mean, they were all doing their thing, and they wanted to bring a similarity and an equality. So we planted our material in those 20 Bible colleges, but...
Now, you wrote all of this.
Yeah.
You put all this together.
I started writing it in Africa,
Amazing.
and I've been writing ever since. And I sit at the desk even now, turning out material. I've written more than 30 books now, which are all part of our training course, which go from the very basic preliminaries to deeper study. And it's not theological and it's not academic. What we say is it's biblical, spiritual, and practical. And when I ask pastors around the world, why do you think it's so successful? The most common answer is because it comes from the heart and it reaches the heart.
Yeah, it's
not coming from the head and reaching the intellect, but it's challenging our spirits. So we've had some amazing results. And just beyond our imagination, oftentimes I feel like the little boy who brought his lunch to the meeting, you know, and it finished up feeding 5,000 people because the Lord got hold of it and broke it and distributed it. But we're operating in 23 different nations, and we're seeing some astounding results.
You were telling us, well, go ahead, but just move into it, whatever.
One of them, the most recent story was that my wife and I have just come back from Indonesia. We were there 12 months ago when we went to this particular church for the first time. And when we met the pastor, he looked me in the eye and said, "You're my guru." I said, "Oh, come, tell me about it." So he said that when he and his wife were young believers, they came to one of our seminars. I mean, I didn't meet them, but they took away the material. And he said, "We've lived in it ever since. We've read it, we've studied it, we've taught it. We've just, that's been, you know, our live stream." And on the strength of that material, which the focus of the material is church planting, he and his wife left their home in one island of Indonesia, went to another island completely, a different people group, and started a house meeting. He said, at the first meetings we had approximately 6 people, an average of 6 people. This is last year, 12 months ago. But now, he said, we've got 15,000 members, from 6 people to 15,000 in 14 years. Now, we've just been back again. They invited us to come back and help them to start a training program to train people like we did in Africa and other places. And when we got there, I said, "You've got 15,000 members." He said, "Oh, no." He said, "We've got 40,000 members now."
Wow.
25,000 have been added in the last 12 months. So that's amazing, isn't it?
You were preaching there or teaching at a prayer meeting of 3,500.
They have a prayer meeting every Saturday morning for their workers, pastors and workers. And they average 3,500 to 4,000 people in each prayer meeting. And that goes for usually about 4 hours. And it's just like sitting on a beach and feeling the waves of praise and worship come over you. You know, there are very few individual prayers. It's corporate prayer, but it just comes wave after wave, and it just lifts you up, you know, inspiring.
Now, some statistics of Indonesia, like we know it's the largest Muslim country in the world, and how many Christians do they think there are? I know there's over 200 million Muslims.
There are approximately 220 million in the population. Yeah. And of course it's an Islamic country. And the general opinion is that there are 25% of the population is Christian. But quite a number of leaders who are on the inside think that it might be closer to 40%.
Really?
But
why, these are undisclosed
well,
people?
Because of the political climate.
Yeah.
You know, the church has got to be very discreet in making claims about how many people there are. Partially because the government is built on representation. So however many people are in a particular community, they have so many seats in Parliament. Well, of course, they can't risk having too many Christian seats in Parliament. So the figure is always kept down. And
it is one of the democratic countries of the world. I mean, yes. It does work. It used to be a dictatorship under Sukarno and Sukarno. But now it is a democratic country.
Yeah, very much.
Which is very special.
In the style of Islamic belief, you know, Islam always has
Sharia law.
Well, yes, and it shapes the nation. Otherwise, but basically it is a democratic nation. One of the other pastors whom we know very well, he has a church building that seats 25,000 people, and it's filled 7 times every Sunday with a different congregation.
Wait a minute, 7 times? That's 175,000 people?
Yeah. And one of the,
wow.
in fact, there are several pastors with churches towards that number. And what we felt while we were there this time so strongly was that part of the secret is, number one, they're a praying people. They put a lot of emphasis on prayer. And secondly, they have a tremendous love for Israel. We were in Indonesia, my wife and I, some years ago, and the young pastor with whom we were staying knew that we were coming to Israel. I was directing the praise and worship in those days at the Feast of Tabernacles. And he said, "Do you think I could come to Israel?" So I said, "Sure." Then within a week he said, "I've got 2 other pastor friends who'd like to come. Would it be okay if the 3 of us came?" So I said, "Sure, we'll organize it." When they came to Jerusalem, there were 300 of them, including those 3 pastors. One of them pastors the church with a 25,000 people
7
center.
times.
Yeah. Another one, I think, has close to 200,000 members, and this younger one has 40,000 members. And each of them comes to Israel, usually 3 times a year, and brings a tour group with them. And I was teaching there a few weeks ago, and I was teaching on Israel and the future of Israel.
Yes, you
and
have.
The people were interrupting me, standing up, waving their arms, and shouting, "Long live Israel!" You know, and they've got shofar blowers in the congregation. So in the middle of the worship, the shofar is blown. You know, you feel as though, wow, am I in Indonesia or am I in Jerusalem? It's exciting. They're all lovers of Israel, and while we were having these meetings, you know, I preached to nearly 30,000 people on the Sunday, and as one congregation goes out, the next congregation is all lined up outside the door, waiting to come in, you know, and it's like this all day long.
It's a pastor's delight.
Yeah, it's great, wonderful.
Now, you have just written a book called Messiah Comes to Israel, and we want to talk about this more in our next program, because it's a very special book that talks about the unfolding events surrounding Israel in these days as it's leading up to the appearance of the Messiah. I always say that Israel is the only country in the world that's on a collision course with the Messiah, physically. So we want to get into that. I want to give you plenty of time to talk about that, but so that people know what's coming next program, what is the inspiration of this?
The inspiration comes mainly from Zechariah 12, a chapter that I must have read, you know, several dozen times over the years, until a couple or 3 years ago, it suddenly struck me what it was actually saying. In verse 9 and 10, there's a war that is waged against Israel, an attack on the nation. And it says that God makes up his mind to destroy all the enemies that come against Israel. And then it says in verse 10, "And after this I will pour out my spirit, the spirit of grace and supplication, upon the house of David and upon the inhabitants of Jerusalem. And they shall look upon me whom they have pierced, and they shall go into mourning. And the whole land even, Eretz Israel, mourns," you know. And I suddenly realized this is an appearance of the Messiah that nobody's ever talked about.
Yeah.
This is an appearance of the Messiah, first of all, to win a tremendous supernatural victory for Israel. But then when they look around to see where did that come from, they look upon the one who was pierced. And this is God speaking, whom we often call Yahweh. He's the one who's speaking, and he says, "They shall look upon me, whom they pierced."
Yeah.
So there's an understanding that the one who was crucified outside of Jerusalem was actually the God of Israel, the Holy One of Israel. And of course he was pierced in the form that we know as Jesus.
Crucifixion.
He's the Jewish Messiah. Yeah. And I read, while I was writing, then I began to write a book, and while I was writing it, I looked up quite a few Christian commentators on it. And if you want to have a laugh sometime, read Christian commentary on Zechariah 12:10, because they've got all kinds of weird interpretations that are far from what it actually says,
Yeah.
which is that the Messiah will appear and they will recognize him by the wounds in his body. And when I saw that, I thought, wow, this is tremendous, because it's preceded by a war on Israel that is in the making right now.
Exactly.
I mean, it's come from Gaza, it's come from Lebanon, it's all the time it's being spoken of in Iran. It's on the verge, it's on the borders. And subsequently, immediately following that attack that is foretold in Psalm 83 and Zechariah 12, the Messiah, you know, they need supernatural intervention.
Yeah.
I believe they're attacked in such a way that even the IDF can't handle it, and God steps in and delivers them.
Yeah, it is frightening on one hand, but encouraging on another hand, to know that God will get involved in this next war. You know, it's when you think of Gaza, you think of also Lebanon, especially Syria, Iran. They're all bristling with rockets, and they're not aimed anywhere else but us. They're aimed here. And conservative estimates are that if a war starts, and this is not a nuclear, this is conventional, we would be expecting somewhere in the neighborhood of 100,000 casualties. I mean, that's people dead, not injured.
Yeah. But the thing is, Jay, that in both Psalm 83 and Zechariah 12, both of which chapters tell the story in some detail about that war, there's no intermention of Israeli casualties. God speaks about destroying the enemy. He speaks about the Israelis going like torches in a field of dry corn or wheat. He speaks about devastation upon the enemies of Israel, but there's no indication, there's not one negative thing that intimates that Israel is going to suffer any great tragedy.
Well, that is very encouraging.
Absolutely.
Those of us that live here, that is very encouraging. Okay, so I want to get into this in more detail in the next program, where you have the full minutes involved in the interview, but what was your response in Indonesia, for example, when you preached along these lines?
In both Indonesia, and then afterwards we went to Malaysia.
Another Muslim country.
Yeah, Malaysia is the only country in the world where in the Malaysian passport it's printed, this document is valid in every country except Israel. And Malaysian citizens are not allowed to visit Israel. If they come here, they have to come through Singapore and leave no evidence of their tracks, and get back home again without having any stamps in their passport, because the nation...
Will the Israeli authorities accept that passport?
Yes.
Even it's got that written in it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But they won't stamp it?
They won't stamp it.
Oh, that's great.
No. They're realistic,
because
they?
Israel, one of Israel's basic first laws that they passed in the Knesset was first the law of return, that Jews could come home, and secondly, the law of the right of any pilgrim of Jewish, Christian, and Muslim faiths to come here to see the holy sites.
Yeah.
Because, you know, prior to 48, they were all kept, you know, especially the Jews were kept away. They couldn't go to their holy site of the Western Wall.
Absolutely.
So they said, no way, we're going to open this up. So now you're saying Muslims and Christians and people from anywhere in the world can come and visit Israel, even if their passport says it doesn't work. That's amazing.
Yeah, it is true, yeah. I guess Israel are far more realistic than most other governments are, you know. There's a lot of subterfuge in many governments, but Israel is aware of it.
Well, we've had a few experiences of having to learn how to be realistic in the midst of craziness. Like our neighbors who we're supposed to make peace with won't recognize our existence, you know. Yeah. But anyway, coming back to your church planting, tell us what's happening, if you can. I don't know, some of this may be information, maybe not permissible, but what's happening in China, for example?
Well, let me start with India.
Okay.
In India, we have 1,500 what we call master trainers. These are mostly senior pastors who have gone through our course, who have sat as students under the course to the degree where they're deemed able to teach the material. 15,000 master teachers. Now, each of those has between 35 and 40 students. And they are planting hundreds of churches every year in India. And in some parts of India, there's real persecution. I mean, burning down churches, they're killing Christians. It's a very dangerous situation in many ways. But the churches are just flourishing. They're growing exponentially. In China, it's even more remarkable. But of course, it's got to be under the radar because officially this is not supposed to be taking place.
Yeah, right.
But it's estimated that there are over 100 million Christians in China. And one group that have accepted our training course has 10 million members. and several groups have accepted it. So the figures are astronomical, you know, they're just remarkable.
Well, this is such encouraging news. From a far country, it's like a drink of cold water, but it's so encouraging. And Gerald, we want to thank you for being with us today, and we love you folks dearly, and thank you for your friendship. And we want to encourage you that are watching today to write into us so that you can get more information about Gerald Rowlands and Elizabeth Rowlands and their amazing work, and also their church planting work. If you'll write to us, or if you'll email us, or if you'll get contact with us, we will pass on your names to them. So we've run out of time. I'm so sorry, but may the Lord bless you. And please do tune in again, as Gerald's going to be our guest again and talk about his vitally important book, The Messiah Comes to Israel. So this is Jay Rawlings reporting to you for People Making a Difference from Mevaseret Zion, announcing the good news from Zion. And so until next time, we're saying Shalom from Jerusalem. For further information on how you and your congregation might honor Israel, please be in touch with us at www.israelvision.tv or write to us at P.O. Box 40101, Mevaseret Zion, Israel, 91400. May God bless you, and remember the Bible says, I will bless those who bless you. Shalom from Jerusalem.